Hello again, everybody. And today I'm joining you from beautiful The Hague in the Netherlands, and more particularly from Clingendale Park. And especially in fall, it's really fantastic to stand here with all the pretty colors in the trees. But my morning didn't start that beautifully. At 4 a.m. there was a fire alarm in my hotel, which was fucking annoying. Everybody had to get out. It turned out to be a false alarm, but it simply didn't stop. But anyway, now I'm here, and the reason why I'm filming this so early is because, well, I couldn't sleep anyway. So here I am, and I do not regret it because I had a pretty beautiful sunrise today. But, well, anyway, today we'll be talking about gear. And usually if you want to have the best picture quality, you're usually advised to buy into the first party glass. So in the case of my Fujifilm cameras, I would have to buy the best XF lenses that are pretty expensive in order to have the best quality, the best autofocus, the best bokeh, and so on. But today I want to challenge that conception by introducing you to two lenses I've been using over the past year. One of them is the one I'm currently having in my hand. This is the Viltrox 75mm f1.2, and the other one is filming me right now, which is the 27mm f1.2 by Viltrox. They advertise these lenses as pro lenses, and today I want to tell you that they are pretty much on par with Fujifilm's native lenses, and in some regard, even better than Fujifilm native glass. Okay, actually, one more small final note before we get into the video. I'm not sponsored by Viltrox. I have not communicated with Viltrox. I have bought both lenses a year ago with my own money, so there is no influence whatsoever in what I'm going to say today, and I can essentially say whatever I want. And, well, now we can actually get into the video. Okay, so the first thing we need to be talking about is build quality. And this is usually where third-party manufacturers are cutting the costs. They employ materials like plastic to keep the weight and the cost down. They do not use aperture rings, and these lenses are typically also not weather sealed. But this is different for the Viltrox PRO lenses 27 and 75mm, because these lenses are first of all fully built out of metal, so they're really rugged, and it's really hard to get them scratched. So even after a year, my lenses are still looking pretty decent. Additionally, these lenses have a really nice, clicky, well-dampened aperture ring, which especially for me as a Fuji shooter is incredibly valuable, because I want to have dedicated controls over my shutter speed, over my ISO, and also over my aperture, and having an aperture ring is really decent. Then the final thing, and that's quite surprising, especially at this price level, is that these lenses are weather sealed. And I have taken the Viltrox lenses in any conditions, be it rain, be it storm. Like, I've really taken them out into the worst of conditions, and these lenses withstood it all. I never had any troubles whatsoever. So in terms of build quality, Viltrox really pursued a strategy to really compete with the main native Fujifilm lenses, because they're equally as well built as native Fujifilm lenses. Arguably the most important thing that makes people either buy or not buy a lens is whether these lenses are actually sharp. And usually third-party optics are not that sharp. They're not that sharp wide open, and if you stop them down, they improve, but they never reach the same level as, let's say, a professional native lens. But for the Viltrox optics, this is actually quite different, because both of these lenses are sharp wide open. They basically reach maximum sharpness wide open, and if you stop down, there is hardly any improvement to be made. And I've tried these lenses on my 26 megapixel cameras and even on my 40 megapixel cameras, and these lenses really eat those sensors for breakfast. So when it comes to sharpness, it's a really great performance. And I have to admit, I never really check sharpness wide open in the corners, because I guess they're going to be blurry anyway. But I can tell you that I've actually also zoomed into the corner once, and these lenses are really sharp wide open, both in the centers as well as in the corners. And yeah, optically, these are among the best lenses that are out there. And I have actually compared my 56mm f1.2 Gen 2 by Fujifilm to the 75mm f1.2, and I have found that the Viltrox is actually slightly sharper in the middle than the 56mm Fujifilm lens, wide open, and if you stop down, it's roughly on par. And with regards to the 27mm, I do not own the 33mm f1.4 by Fujifilm, but I have tried it a couple of times and I found them to be about on par. There's even reviews that state that the Viltrox is a little bit sharper, but it's roughly at the same quality as my 18mm f1.4. It's different focal lengths, but they are roughly as sharp, meaning that these Viltrox lenses, despite being third-party optics, actually really perform. Alright, the next thing we're going to talk about is bokeh, because if you're considering buying a lens that has an aperture as wide as f1.2, you probably want to have soft out-of-focus backgrounds, and this is another point where these lenses excel. Like right now I'm filming on the 75mm f1.2, just that you can see what the bokeh of that lens looks like. The background is rather busy, it's foliage, and there is no outlining, it's really soft, it's nicely rendered, and there is also no chromatic aberrations at all, neither in the bokeh balls nor in the focus areas. So these lenses are really well controlled when it comes to chromatic aberrations, and that's also reflected in the bokeh of these lenses. And I have compared the bokeh of the 27mm and the 75mm to native Fujifilm glass. And for instance, if we compare the 75mm f1.2 to the Fujifilm 56mm f1.2, I have realized that the bokeh on the 75mm f1.2 is softer than the bokeh on the 56mm f1.2 by Fujifilm. On the one hand, this is due to just the 75mm focal length. It's actually significantly tighter, meaning that you get just more bokeh, that the depth of field is going to be even thinner. But I've also noticed that the lens, the 75mm Viltrox, is actually cleaner when it comes to bokeh. So there is no outlining at all, like no longitudinal chromatic aberrations. But also in the in-focus areas, you won't see any chromatic aberrations at all. And that's also the case for the 27mm f1.2. So when it comes to bokeh, when it comes to chromatic aberrations, these lenses are among the best you can get in the Fujifilm system, all the way up there, or even better than the native Fujifilm glass. Alright, so now that I've praised these lenses for so long, you're probably wondering, where are the quirks? And there is a few, and these also deserve to be mentioned. The first one is that these are chunkier lenses. These are f1.2 optics, so they're usually like about a third larger than the regular f1.4 lenses that Fujifilm makes, and I guess that's just the trade-off. You have to pay if you want to have a lens that's first of all sharp at f1.2 and f1.2 in the first place. But they're really heavy, especially the 75mm is very front heavy because it's a bit longer than this lens. It actually makes a practically relevant difference. And they weigh around 500 grams, the 75mm a little bit more, this one a little bit under it, and especially for an APS-C lens, this is quite a lot. So that's something to bear in mind in case you're picking it up. So make sure to try it out to make sure that these lenses are not too big for you, because especially the Fujifilm f1.4 primes are actually significantly lighter, and they also have much less volume, and they're easier to carry around. In my opinion, the perfect balance. The next thing we have to talk about is autofocus. And autofocus, these lenses have been criticized for having bad autofocus, and I have to say that there is no significant difference from Fujifilm lenses. I have done sports in action, especially with a 75mm f1.2, which focuses, for instance, better than the 56mm f1.2 by Fujifilm, but these lenses still only have stepper motors, they have pretty big glass elements, and they need to be driven. And it's going to take a while for them to focus from a shorter object to an object that's a little bit further in the past, but once they've acquired focus, they actually track reasonably well. And also bear in mind that the autofocus of these lenses can only be as good as the algorithms in the camera allow it to be. And especially for Fujifilm, the brand doesn't really have a good track record when it comes to autofocus, autofocusing firmwares. Like sometimes the tracking is just not where it should be, and most of my shots that have been autofocus have actually not been due to the lens, but mostly due to faulty algorithms that simply do not track my subject properly. But if I shoot these lenses in single point autofocus, as I usually do, most of my shots are going to be in focus once the focus is acquired, because again, focusing acquisition is a little bit slower than on Fujifilm's linear motor driven lenses like the 18mm, the 23mm, or the 33mm f1.4 lenses by Fujifilm. The final thing we need to talk about is flaring, and these lenses have some flaring issues, and their coatings are generally not as good as the ones that Fujifilm uses in their own lenses, which means that they lose contrast quite a lot, there is a lot of ghosts in the frame, and there is also these interesting ring patterns, like it's like rainbow rings around your subject, but if you're very unlucky, these rings are actually going to go right through your subject, which is going to be an issue because that's going to be hard or even impossible to fix in post. So if you shoot backlit portraits a lot, if you shoot a lot against the sun or against bright light sources in general, these are probably not the lenses for you, and the Fujifilm native optics will actually do a better job in that regard. Alright, so what did we learn today? Well, this review today was actually never supposed to be a comprehensive review. There is many more things to touch upon when it comes to these Viltrox lenses, and I'm probably gonna release a review of each of these lenses independently in the future. But for now, I wanted to give you a small overview about what these lenses can do, how good they actually are, but also what limitations they have. And at the same time, I also try to make a comparison to how they compete with Fujifilm's native optics and draw the conclusion that these lenses are actually very well capable of replacing native Fujifilm lenses, especially when it comes to sharpness, when it comes to bokeh quality, and when it comes to build quality. But at the same time, there is also a few drawbacks that we need to consider, especially related to flaring, especially related to autofocus. If you want to have the fastest autofocus, the linear motor driven lenses by Fujifilm are still going to be the better choice. But for most people, these lenses are going to be fantastic. And if we now factor in the price in this equation, it's actually really hard to even still justify the regular Fujifilm primes unless you're really conscious about weight, about flaring performance, and if you want to have the fastest autofocus possible, because the linear motor driven Fujifilm lenses will still perform a little bit better in that regard. But at half the price, these lenses are really great and really good substitutes to the regular native glass. And by the way, these lenses are also available in Sony and Nikon, so this is not necessarily a review targeted at Fujifilm users, but at all mounts where this lens is available. And now it's actually getting really quite cold here, and I hope that the fire alarm has stopped by now. So, well, it's getting time to get home and have coffee. So, bye.